Well, you're all very welcome. We're delighted to have everybody here, and we really appreciate you kind of taking time out of busy evenings to be with us today in this conversation. It's part of a Erasmus Plus research project around inclusive education. So we're very excited to kind of have the group of people that we have here with us today. I just want to introduce Macdara, who's going to be hosting the conversation, and then he in turn will introduce everybody else to the space. So Macdara Deery is our second tutor ambassador, and he currently works as a post-primary teacher of English in a small rural school in the Midlands. And he's now teaching formally for 9 years, and as he said, returning to higher education later than most people, but with that then bringing an incredibly rich set of life skills and experiences in various different fields before coming into teaching, including working in cattle stations in Australia and in the Canadian oil fields, as a wilderness guide in the Rocky Mountains, working with horses and being a master farrier in Ireland. And then as he returned to Ireland in the late 1990s, training in theatre and stage performance, including being involved in youth theatre and outreach in Offaly for many years, and now is currently working with the NCCA on the development group for the new Leaving Cert drama, film and theatre studies. So he brings like huge wealth of background and experience into the Tutor project, and it's kind of encapsulating that and carrying that into our work today. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Macdara.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming, and you're all very welcome. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for the introduction there. Just before I introduce the other guys, if I could just say I've just come from the final meeting of the drama, film and theatre studies. It's over now. The specs will go to the government. So an incredible process, but that's just because it's in my head. I've got to say that. So without further ado, if I could introduce Emma Tierney, is currently working as a postgraduate student in the Higher Diploma of Further Education program at Maynooth University. She holds a bachelor's degree in community studies and has a strong interest in critical pedagogy as an educational approach. Emma is interested in empowering learners to become active participants in their own education and agents of social transformation. Then we have Declan Markey. He's a lecturer in the Department of Adult and Community Education in Maynooth University, and he's part of the team coordinating the Turn to Teaching program. Since completing his studies in social sciences and social research, he's been designing educational programs and coordinating educational services specifically aimed at widening participation in higher education for groups and communities who are underrepresented in that space. And then finally, we're delighted to have Katrina O'Sullivan with us, a lecturer of digital skills in the Assisting Living and Learning Institute at the Department of Psychology in Maynooth University. Her research interests relate to examining issues relating to digital equality and equity education, for which she has received research grants from the Irish Research Council and Science Foundation Ireland. Katrina has been an invited speaker at the World Education Forum and the European Gender Action Workshop on women and digitization, and worked closely with the Irish policymakers to develop policies around education and inclusion. Katrina has published research on equality, gender, education, inclusion, and STEM, as well as her memoir, Poor, which is a fantastic read. I can say that I've managed to get a copy of it, and I'm about halfway through. So, oh, you have it there as well, Katrina. I didn't. A really fascinating read, and very brave, very honest and brave sharing of personal experiences. So it's a #1 on the Irish nonfiction bestseller list at the moment. So with that said, I would like to maybe kick it off maybe by asking a question, and maybe if Katrina, if you would maybe think about kind of kicking it off. I suppose it's a very pertinent question to ask here. Is class still an issue in Irish education?
Thanks so much, Macdara, for that wonderful introduction, and everyone who's here. I'm really delighted to be having a conversation with so many great speakers about education and inclusion and all the challenges. Social class. Yeah, I think it's the elephant in the room a lot of the time, especially in Ireland. We really like to deny class as an issue. I think we have a really lovely warm feeling about ourselves, especially in education, and the idea that we treat people differently based on their social class just doesn't sit well with that perception. But the reality is you have to say to somebody, you know, swap your house in Ballsbridge with one in Ballymun, and then you will see that people recognize that class is an issue. And then, you know, you can heat map progression to education and employment based on postcodes. And then postcodes are, you know, we know Hubble maps actually kind of can identify where areas of disadvantage are. And when we look at them areas of disadvantage, we will know that lots of more kids will finish school early, not progress to higher education. So the long answer is yes, class has always been an issue, and it still is a big issue now. And I think in some ways it's bigger now than it's ever been, because there's a bigger distance now. There's bigger distances in terms of earnings, and the distance between the rich and the poor is growing massively. And with the influx of people from different cultures and different countries and the way they're being treated, we just have we're really at risk of not serving people properly based on their social class and education. So 100% it's an issue. It was an issue when I was a child, and it's definitely an issue now.
Very good. Yeah. I would, I mean, obviously, well, not obviously, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And I've witnessed it in my own education as a child in a rural town in mid Ireland. And I'm experiencing it again now from the other side of the desk, literally, and do everything within my power to try and bridge those gaps. But it's difficult to stand alone against a tide or a current. One can often find oneself swamped by it, you know, but it doesn't mean doing it.
I think one of the things that I would talk about a lot when I talk about my book and my own story or other people's stories is the distinction between rich, poor, and poor people. And that I use them terms. They're not sociology terms, by the way. Please don't pull me up to sociologists on the call. But at the end of the day, like since my book came out, people will sidle up to me real quietly and say, "I was poor too." You know, but there's a big difference between having no money in your house, and having values and experience around education, and then having none of that in your house. So having no money and also no experience or knowledge of the value or what higher education or continued education can do for a person. So we definitely need to recognize that there are people who are completely underserved within the education system. Right now, about 10% of us are still underserved. The same groups and families have been underserved for years, and they belong to a certain social class. And we need to do more, because like I'm fucking deadly, and like I'm doing deadly stuff in education because I found a way through the dark arts at the end of the day. So like, you know, I'm very strong about that. But class is an issue. It's been an issue for years, and it's continuing to be. And I'd love to hear what, I suppose, Declan, you're working in the cold front in that as well. And Emma, you know, if you think it's still an issue.
Without question, Katrina, like I suppose from the perspective of where I'm sitting these days on the Turn to Teaching program that yourself and Gareth, you know, kicked off 7 or 8 years ago, which is an access course similar to the TAP course that you would have taken part in, Katrina, that well, an alternative pathway into higher education. Turn to teaching is an alternative pathway for students who want to be primary teachers but haven't got the necessary points or haven't got the necessary criteria that enables them to progress to kind of the normal route with the points through the CAO and into an initial teacher education. But I suppose when we take applications and we meet all the students who are trying to apply and get into the course, like as we talk to the students that, you know, whether they're young students that are just coming from the Leaving Cert or whether they're students who are in a PLC or somebody who's working and has seen the advertising for Turn to Teaching and knows that deep down they've always wanted to be a teacher, but the education system has kind of spat them out on the other side of it and not enabled them to kind of achieve their goal. We're listening to the stories around, you know, we're talking to the people who are applying, and they're telling us the things that have happened to them on their education journeys that have meant that they haven't got the same type of education that is available to students or people coming from wealthier areas or areas, you know, schools that are in different socioeconomic groups, you know, and you really hear people's experience of educational inequality or educational disadvantage. We had a student last year that had to teach themselves Spanish throughout 5th and 6th year because the school couldn't replace the Spanish teacher that hadn't gone. We just another student that, you know, their Irish teacher had changed 3 and 4 times because just the constant turnover of teaching. And these are happening in spaces that are in schools, that are in communities, as Katrina, you're pointing out. The Pubble Deprivation Index will light them up as, you know, red or dark orange. There are areas that are experiencing, you know, socioeconomic disadvantage. So class is still a massive part of the Irish education system, still a massive, you know, impact on where you're from, has a huge impact on where you can get. Now, in saying that, it's definitely getting better. There's more people in the colleges are opening up to, you know, in comparison to what they were 30, 40 years ago. But we're still leaving a lot of people, a lot of brilliant people like you, Katrina, behind, you know, that just, you know, until they meet the right person or find that right pathway or get the right information, they can find a little crack in the system that can get them in, you know. The system isn't completely open as we like to agree.
Yeah, if I could just come in there as well, I was thinking, you know, it's really about helping kind of people to challenge those stories that kind of they tell themselves in relation to their own kind of you know, for example, if someone is telling themselves that they're saying that they are homeless because they're an early school leaver, that you know, it's making people kind of realize that it's not that, it's they've been failed by the system really, and that you know, the reason why they're homeless is not because they left school early, it's because the government are not building social housing. And I think really in adult education, you know, about trying to get people to understand their own kind of stories is really important.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd like to say there as well. I mean, obviously, Katrina, you're coming the social, the socioeconomic, maybe. I'd like to kind of maybe just say a word on the socio part of it, because I don't understand.
We are here, Katrina.
Sorry. Yeah. I don't quite understand.
Sorry.
And I can't.
Sorry. You can mute that person. There you go.
Thank you. I'll take out my teacher's hat here.
Yeah.
I don't understand poverty because I've never truly experienced it. Talking about, you know, I think poverty could be widened out into, you know, do we have a poverty of emotional support? Do we have a poverty of these kinds of things? But I think the economic poverty, I have never really experienced that. Not really. I can't say I have, no. Even when I found myself in different parts of the world at different times of my life, out on my ear, I was only a phone call or a swallowing of my own pride to get back inside, you know. But I would like to maybe just shine a light on the socio part of that. This people I've noticed, and I have been excluded myself, having lived abroad. So I've been excluded simply maybe just because I'm Irish, or now working in a very rural school. There's a lot of, let's say, working class. They're not poor in the kind of traditional maybe sense, of the sense that we're talking about, but because they speak a certain way, look a certain way, because they come in and they've milked cattle for 2 hours before they come to school, and they have to do the same when they go back. I think that can exclude, and I've seen it happen as well. Emma, I'd like to kind of maybe ask you. You've just come from the classroom yourself. Is that anything that resonates with you?
Yeah, so from the perspective of further education, my experience as a learner and an educator, like it's kind of like I'm just starting out on my journey, and like it's kind of like too, you're learning and that you're about kind of transformative education, and you're learning about like, you know, you're learning about like these different methodologies in bringing them into the classroom in further ed and in adult education. And then when you put it into practice, it's kind of very different. There's definitely challenges that are there and were kind of experienced from all people in my class in Maynooth. And like the reality experience, like for me, and this is also very common for a lot of people, that shallow kind of form of rote learning where students were kind of getting through and nothing really has changed. They're kind of getting through their courses, but nothing really has changed. So it's how to kind of, challenge that kind of dominant model of teaching and learning and further education. And so kind of despite the kind of evolving landscape of education, those methodologies are still heavily relied on. And one of the other aspects of kind of the challenge would have been participation in further education and with kind of young people. And then you're kind of thinking, is that like a product of that kind of still rote learning kind of methodology that's still there in second level? So it's kind of passing through. That was just a real kind of eye-opener for me. And I know a lot of people in my class said the same, that they experienced the same.
Yeah.
Can I just come in there for a minute as well, Macdara, around, so like there's a difference between, so we need to be clear, right? So there's a difference between belonging to a social class and, being a farmer or being Irish and feeling different because you're Irish. Like social class has identity attached to it, and it's not necessarily related to, related to money and economics. So you're right to talk about the socio element of it, and that relates to how you dress, how you speak, how your values, your cultural capital, what you're exposed to in your community. And like when we talk about social class, there is discrimination, and there's discriminatory practices that happen within our education system right now that relate specifically to social class, that we definitely need to kind of call out and be mindful of, not like bunching things together that don't belong in that category. Okay, so feeling different, we all experience feeling different, I think, humanly, and we might all feel left out, and we might all feel, but when there's systemic issues that block a certain group because of their belonging because of their ethnicity or their social class or their age, that's a very serious issue. And so that I just need to say that. And so in terms of the socio element of it, I can talk directly to that. Just in terms of like going to college when you don't have the words that other people have, you don't have the book smart history. Like I went to Trinity and I never had a fucking satchel. I never went skiing. I never ate couscous. I didn't like it. It was disgusting. I swore a lot. I do still swear a lot, you probably can tell, but like they're part of my identity at the end of the day. And like Trinity College and places like that university, and our university, so like I'm not going to deny our university as well in this, they're designed for a certain type of person. And that person is somebody who already has access to the capital needed to navigate it. And someone, Leah, in the chat mentioned this. Like, we're getting very good at getting people in, but are we getting them through? And then when they get through, are they moving into the higher jobs? Like, I was one of the only people that has a PhD from the Trinity Access Programme. Because, like, oftentimes we can get people in, but they end up going back and working in jobs. They don't always progress to the high status jobs. And I'm not saying my job's high status, but they don't progress because the supports are not there all the way through, recognizing that certain groups have different experiences. And I loved what you said there, Emma, about, you know, change. The biggest gift of education for me was realizing that it wasn't my fault. Like, it wasn't something about me that made me fail in education, like that I wasn't fundamentally broken. Like, the system actually underserved me all the way through and taught me something about myself that wasn't the truth. Like, it taught me that I was a stupid girl, basically, that I didn't get a leaving cert or the points, and that meant I wasn't very clever. That was the basic reasoning. And so I love that what you're saying, Emma, about how adult ed allows the reframing of the narrative and allows the reframing of, but we don't all have that. So adult ed,
Well, it
doesn't-
should do
doesn't.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Because when you go into it,
some of the
yeah,
some of the courses don't. They
Oh.
don't. You know, they're still very much in that old kind of historic way, and students and young people are not given the opportunity to actually you know, ask those questions or have that kind of understand kind of the root causes, like what you were saying, Katrina. Like one of the young people in my teaching practice very recently was uprooted. He was an asylum seeker and uprooted and displaced midway through the academic year of his course, taken and put down to a different part of the country, and, you know, completely uprooted. You know, that was unbelievable. Like, you know, that's something I wasn't aware of that would be happening, and it happens, those marginalized groups, and policies should be there to kind of collaborate and those unique kind of circumstances, you know, for people like that in those groups.
Yeah, would you like to come in there? Yeah.
Yeah, like I suppose all of this as we're chatting speaks to the whole kind of theme of what we're talking about in relation to inclusive education, and, you know, like what Emma is saying there, like that's just you know, it's just still kind of baffling that the college or the university that student is in isn't able to advocate on that student's behalf and a bit of common sense prevail, and the student is, you know, able to reside in an area geographically, you know, reasonable to attend the course that they are, you know. But unfortunately, the concept of inclusive education, you know, we're probably still the radicals that are doing it. It sounds like common sense to a lot of us, in terms of treating people with, you know, I suppose the thing that kind of drives a lot of my work, and it would be around, you know, are you recognizing that the unlimited potential in everybody that comes in front of you, you know, whether they're, no matter where they're from, who they are, you know, is that there's an innate potential in that individual when they're sitting or standing or wherever they are with you in an education space. And are you doing your best to kind of, you know, support that student that learner in that process? And I suppose just to kind of speak on like, you know, as Katrina's point earlier on around, you know, the piece around, you know, we're doing so much, there's so much funding going into widening participation and getting people in. And the big thing at the moment, like, is the cost of living. Like, you know, there's even more people, you know, you don't even have to be working class and be poor anymore, the way things go. I'm walking across the campus there, and I bump into two students, and they're just telling me like that the air of stress around the campus is, they can just feel it, and it's just, students are just crippled financially. So that's even tenfold then when you're talking about some of the, you know, the communities and groups that we're talking about that are living in poverty, and the resources, the finances, the grants aren't even sufficient to keep them going. But I'll just say one more thing around that piece around the in, to, and through, and I think it speaks to, like, you know, where the kind of barriers are, and as much as we talk about inclusive education, outside, once they get outside the university, are their colleagues and work colleagues, or is society coming with an inclusive mindset as well? Again, I come back to turn to teaching, and, you know, some of the widening participation initiatives that have happened over the last couple of years around diversifying who our teachers are, and a big part of that is working with working with travellers and supporting traveller students who want to be teachers. And we're finding now that many of them have come through the initial teacher education, found places in schools, and it's actually the colleagues in schools where the racism and discrimination means that these traveller students who've done everything to achieve their potential and their goal of becoming a teacher are faced with, you know, people who you expect to be educated but are actually treating them in a way that they have now, you know, turned away from teaching because it's just almost impossible for them to carry it, you know.
Yeah, Declan, that is such a good point. I mean, like I started terms teaching, it was my job before yours, and I met one of my students. She graduated as a teacher last year, and she told me that being in her old school, which was a deaf school, and witnessing the conversations that the teachers had about the students was so too difficult for her to stay. And I started to cry, you know, because I was like, I sold her a lie. Like I literally sold this girl a lie. I said, become a teacher and it will change your life. And it's hurt her, you know. So we don't need to be educating. We don't need to change poor people, lads. We're fucking grand. We're amazing. We need to change the people who are already in education. Like loads of people are saying this in the chat, which is amazing. Principals are saying it. Yeah. And inclusive education isn't about educating the people necessarily. It's changing the system. And that's a really good point around teachers.
Brilliant points. Brilliant points. Yeah.
Teachers need to be educated. Policy makers need to be educated.
Yeah.
The people in education need to be educated about what inequality is and what it looks like and what disadvantage is in the space of our universities or our schools.
Yeah.
And again, like that, sorry, you know, for kind of diverting, but like there's something around, you know, as Katrina is saying, like, you know, the concept of inclusive education and, you know, we know universal design for learning, UDL, and like you can equip people with a skill set and they can do some training. Oh yeah, I can do inclusive education. If they haven't had a shift in their mindset that actually believes in, in every student and learner that's in front of them and stuff, or, you know, and we all have assumptions and prejudices and stuff, but if you can't, you know, as Emma's learning and with adults, you critically reflect on that and acknowledge, you know, your own kind of cultural background and your cultural assumptions and get past them and actually, you know, and well, then it doesn't, you know, inclusive education isn't really going to kind of make any difference in terms of the space that you're in.
I think the word there, I suppose, is our kind of our biases need to be dug out, exposed, cleaned out, and treated. I'd like to just, if we could, it seems a short anecdote from myself, and maybe this is maybe trying to move on to another question here, or just steer the conversation towards how we connect with our students. And I would like to take up the point now that Katrina has very, very much shone a light on there. I'm going to include in our students the teachers, because they need to be students, and the policymakers, and the people and the higher echelons of all this structure. How do we connect with them? You know, so. Just a short, and the travellers for me now would be the elephant in the room kind of when it comes to our Irishness, and you know, we don't need any foreign kind of refugees. It exacerbates it. It highlights what's going on, but we've always had this traveller bias and separation in our society. I worked as a farrier, which is a blacksmith. I've worked with horses all my life, and I worked very much. I put myself through college at nighttime online to become a teacher while I was shoeing horses during the day. And a lot of my clients would have been, some of my clients at the time would have been travelers. So, I mean, I deal with every horse with an open hand and a downcast eye, as I would any human. And I was told myself by a lot of people, just Mac, mind out there now, make sure you get paid. Just the bias would start flowing out. And I'd be like, well, you know, the horse needs shod, and the guy has called me to do that. And by simply treating, and I'm sorry, I did part of my my thesis for my master's in my approach, the approach to working with large animals, the same being very similar to the approach to working with young people. You got to kind of come in with that respect, and everybody is equal until something happens to make them not equal. And I think that is something that I have found that a lot of people, as you've said, that when they move out of maybe education and into the field themselves, that they don't experience it. They're still being treated like the bad horse, the one that's going to kick just because it comes from that part of the town. Connecting with students, connecting with people. How do we do that?
In my case, I'm happy to, like, I think I just, from my own experience as an angry kid in school who was hurt by my own family and grew up in addiction. Like I entered primary school and secondary school with an inability to sit still, and untamable was the description of me early school. I still like that. I still like the idea that I'm still untamable, but I don't think it was complimentary. But just to share, like, my first experience with an educator was a teacher who, first of all, she told me her story, which she told me her own personal story, how she was a human, which I don't know, like every other teacher, I just thought was this disciplinarian person who was inaccessible. And I kind of felt like that in the higher education as well. Like I had to genuflect when I met them in the hallway. But then, so that's the first thing. But the other thing is, she always believed in my ability to achieve the same as everybody else, irrespective of how I behaved, or even irrespective of how I actually performed. So there was no reduced expectations, timetables. Like you talk about traveller education, one of the things that we always observe is the lack of expectation for them to do homework, to reduce timetables, things like this. So like my first experience with an educator, and I think that's why I'm in education in some ways, is because I met this woman who believed in me, irrespective of the angry, untamable child that I was because of the trauma that I was living through. And I think that is so connecting with a person through care is fundamental in all situations. Like, forget the curriculum, lads.
Yeah.
Like, and to be honest, like as that angry teenager then, the only people I ever wanted to learn from was the ones that cared. The only people I went to their class and I actually listened to was the sound teachers who actually knew me and cared, you know? And so I definitely think there's some space for finding a way to connect with them as a human, with your story, and also then believing in the human potential, being a light to them. And then the final bit is, yeah, just being sound, like, you know, and recognizing that care, making someone feel good about themselves and whole as a human should be our focus as educators. Like that should be the thing. And then you'll find whatever you're good at or bad at or not interested in. So I don't know if that's a bit of a waffle, but
No, not at all. Not at all.
That's my experience.
Yeah, I mean, I found a lot of that kind of thing with myself coming into it. It makes me think of a book I've got up here somewhere to do with horses. When I worked a lot with horses when I was quite a bit younger, breaking and training and that kind of thing with young horses. It's one thing that stood with me. There's no such thing as a problem horse. There's only problem riders. If a horse kicks or bites or turns away, it's not because they're a bad horse. It's because something is motivating that. And I got much better handling horses, let's say, and humans when I finally was able to understand this is just a reaction to something. So it's not a band-aid that's needed here. I need to just get down to the root of it. And a lot of that is holding somebody in your hand and looking at them and saying, I care. And there's tears and there's a breakthrough, and then everything can happen from there. And when I came through my teacher training 9 years ago, I was very disappointed with aspects of that training. It's all based on, a lot of it was based on academia. and very little on developing social skills, counseling skills, basic counseling skills, listening, empathy, you know. And I'd be interested, maybe Emma, you're coming through that gate. I've come through it, you know, close to a decade ago. You're coming through it now. Has it
Yeah,
changed?
like
What are you finding?
in adult education, like the educator and the learner would not be opposites. They would be very equal. And the HTIP has taught me, in my practice, first and foremost, that complete respect, kindness, compassion, connection with people in your group. And like we always would have start with check-ins just to see where people are at, what's going on with them, and just having that connection and that understanding with your group. I just think it's so important, and comes first before anything else, you know. Declan, do you want to?
Yeah, like it's like yeah, I think it's really, you know, me and you talked about it before, like, you have to give a shit. You really have to care, you know what I mean? Like genuinely. And for the students, learners that are coming with, you know, a lot of life going on outside, and, you know, trying to kind of, you know, where education is a real vehicle for changing lives and stuff, you have to care even more then, you know what I mean? Like, and you have to, and it's, you know, sometimes I know there's a fantastic video of Michelle Stowe on the restorative practice piece, talking about the really challenging, the restorative practice, the really challenging interaction she has with a student. It's her TED talk when it was out in Tala there. And, you know, Michelle has to go the extra mile to kind of repair that relationship. And when she does, you know, she doesn't take it personal, but she comes back to kind of care about the student's life and what's going on. And that's what reaps the rewards, you know. I seen it, I think today, I actually, it was Simon Cowell saying, giving advice, right? I don't usually go there, but he said, but I only found that he was saying that it was his father, but it's not. I was looking it up. It's a woman, Mary Kay Ash from Mary Kay Cosmetics over in the States. I don't know, but she had the thing that whenever you're working with people, everybody has a sign wrapped around them saying, "Make me feel important." And I think if you can kind of, you know, there's something in that around, yeah, as an educator, that really is your responsibility to everybody that's in front of you, like, or everybody that's in the circle with
Just to
you.
go back to the class business here. So like, it's so, I believe, this is me, right, that we know that educational disadvantage exists, and it's postcode or country wide, often air code, but also we know the communities where this exists in rural Ireland as well. Like, my belief is that that care is so essential in communities that are underserved, and there's a lot high levels, a high concentration of poverty or disadvantage or lack of knowledge of higher education. I was driving along the other day, I heard an advert for the Institute of Education, right? Which pissed me right off. It was like, we have the best teachers and they will get you the best grades, and we are the best, and we can buy your leaving cert for you. Just pay us $5,000 a year, right? And but the thing that pisses, like, our best educators should be in our most challenging schools. Like, we should have an army. We know this. What hurt me when I learned about education, right, when I became educated, was realizing that Bordeaux, or whatever the fuck his name is, his theory has been around for 100 years now. We have known this shit for 100 years, and we still have not done anything really to rectify the fact that there's a load of kids in Ballymun right now who are in a 32 classroom where probably 15 of them have had trauma, and their parents have never been to higher ed, so they don't know what's going on in that system. And we've known that for 100 years and we've still done nothing. So, like, that's my rant. My point is this: we need to make sure that the most caring, the most talented, the most educated about inequality teachers are in them schools.
How do we do that?
There's an army. We need an army for them.
How do we do it? Because I agree totally. I mean, if we were in a battle, in a war, you send your crack troops to the front line where they're needed most, right? That's obvious, as you say, very eloquently, or very, very eloquently in the sense that it's bloody well straightforward. How do we do it, though?
Well, it'll be controversial.
Do it.
I'd sack a load of teachers, firstly. I'd get rid of the shit ones, because we know there's loads of them there, right? Firstly. And the second one, everybody now who becomes a teacher, I'd reframe how we recruit teachers. I'd use the Finnish model. I'd make sure that all the teachers are interviewed and that they understood fundamentally the power that they have on a young person's life, that was their motivation, that they weren't just there because they had a fucking history degree and they didn't know what to do with it, or because their mum was a teacher or their dad was a teacher or whatever. I'm not saying you're all there for that. Probably great people on this call. But at the end of the day, anyone working in education right now, in a school right now, you could tell me who your best teacher is, but you could also definitely tell me who the bad teachers are. And like, that's not acceptable, especially in a deaf school or a disadvantaged community, because them kids don't have anybody really else to intervene in the process. Like my kids today, I'm on a WhatsApp group with all the posh mammies now. I'm middle class now. And they text in the group when there's a shit teacher and they go, oh, is anybody worried about the maths? And then someone else goes, yeah, will we get a tutor? Will we all put in together? Because we can supplement when you have the knowledge. But if you don't have the knowledge, we need to do more. And I'm not blaming teachers, because anybody who knows my story, I love teachers. They changed my fucking life. Like, I wouldn't be here without two great educators. I just think we cannot continue just ignoring the fact that there are poor elements of our system that are not being changed. And so for me, it's like every teacher should have a proper training in socioeconomic disadvantage. We don't have that. There's a DESH placement if you're lucky, like. So like, these are the things that I would definitely be doing to make sure.
If I could just,
I'm ranting, I'm sorry, but
No,
like,
Katrina, if you want to, like, the recent story about the visit you made in the school, and you know, like, so there's plenty of teachers out there that maybe aren't even aware of, you know, their own role and their impact, and you know, their biases, and how they're, you know, how they're just disrupting or not maybe, you know, bring into teaching as much as they possibly can. You know, that story around you talking to the teachers around, you know, don't be arguing and falling out with students over if they haven't got a pen. Give them a pen, you know.
yeah,
And
like like my story is this. Like my parents are heroin addicts. They used to use the pens to smoke heroin, and I didn't have a pen. And I remember being in this teacher's class, and she used to stand over me, Miss Cowles, I'll call her. She used to stand over me, screaming at me, going, where's your pens? What? Like, I personally offended her because I didn't have my pen. And I would be looking up at her thinking, oh, I didn't have a breakfast, miss. Like, I didn't have breakfast. And then she'd send me to Miss Hooley, which was our principal, which she was a lovely teacher. But Miss Hooley would say to me, I don't mind her. Don't mind her, you know, because she knew. But that also said a message to me, you know, that actually the leader knew that there was bad teachers in the school and they were allowing it. So it broke my trust completely as well with school, because I was like, what is this? Like, very basic reasoning for an 8-year-old child is like, oh, she's not protecting me. And so like that kind of stuff I don't think we can allow that stuff to happen.
to use the language of addiction, they become almost like an enabler then.
Yeah, I would think so.
If I can just jump in, sorry, to say there, just on the pens thing. I mean, nobody ever told me this. A kid needs a pen, you get a pen. So, I mean, I would buy, I don't know, 50 pens, 100 pens in a year. But there are really nice little ways of adding to that. So in my class now, whether the kid can't afford one, it doesn't matter. I don't care. They don't have a pen. I will make a little bit out of it and say, like, okay, I'll give you this pen. But this is a special pen. If you manage to use all the ink in this pen and still have the pen, it's magic. Something can happen. Everybody in the classroom has a little giggle with that. Everybody's with it. I bet you sometimes somebody has a pen in their pencil case and they just want to go through it. But it's making them feel almost magical and important, not inadequate because they don't have a bloody pen. And that's just a pen we're talking about here. What about everything else? Yeah. Sorry, Emma, I think you wanted to come in, did you?
No, I didn't say there. It was the Katrina.
Sorry.
I thought I meant, sorry, I thought it was a message there.
Oh.
No, like, I just think that you still have to, you can be very critical of the education system, but you can't critique it, but you still have to work in it. So I just think teachers do have great power, and by sharing experiences and stories and really kind of challenging them is so important to kind of empower people to kind of be kind of agents of change in their own life as well. So
yeah, I would. There's one word that I wrote down there earlier on. I mean, getting into teaching for me was very much of a vocation. I just found myself, and when I look back on my life, I've been a teacher all my life. I just didn't know I was. I've always loved to share skills and knowledge and stuff like that. I think probably innately we all do. There's another thing that I just think aptitude tests were something that used to be done that aren't done just anymore at all. It's your pocket, your wallet test now. If you've got enough money, like it costs. I was in student debt doing my college stuff there for years afterwards, trying to shoe horses to pay me bloody way. And I saw, but there's no aptitude there. I mean, a simple aptitude test, not a simple aptitude. I don't mean to belittle it, but I think for me, that's a huge part missing in teaching, and probably in a lot of professions. Do we have the aptitude to actually be what is required of us in that space? Could I just maybe talk about a little, when we have been already with the care aspect there. We have a kind of, from an earlier note here, the Maslow versus Bloom. I don't, to tell you the truth, really understand that myself. Katrina, would you shed a light on the way you verbalize Maslow and all this crack?
Yeah, so Maslow focuses on the hierarchy of needs. For those of you who don't know, Maslow's lovely triangle of hierarchy, and basically you need your safety and security, your food, your care before you can reach the top, which is self-actualization. Whereas Bloom is a taxonomy of education and how what we focus on to teach people and how we teach people. And I suppose I would look at that as like care versus the curriculum. And in terms of like the conversations that we're having in terms of inequality or inequity or access, Maslow's work would actually kind of recognize that a person needs to feel safe and secure and have housing, let's say, and food and a consistent home and care before they can fully participate and move to the next level, which and then love and care are second to that. So if we transfer that over to the education system wherever, and in my own personal life, and also the life I think a lot of people are living now, Declan, you mentioned it, but like in terms of like just the cost of living and homelessness and people and financial instability, like having security is the first thing that is needed before we can actually participate in society and move on. So I think an education system that recognizes that, and classrooms or rooms that recognize that are pretty important. It's not always that we can do anything. I like to use an analogy of like, sometimes I talk to teachers and they say, oh, I can't do anything about the parents don't care. And I would always say, look, your garden is the classroom. Like your job is to grow the flowers there, not to be looking out at someone else's garden and saying, Jesus, they're not doing anything in their garden. And I would kind of say, like, we can't necessarily do anything always about people's life, like a child's life. We can't fix trauma or we can't fix their housing, but we can know about it and then include that within our practices in some way. And like, maybe I always like to think of like a dartboard. Like when I'm designing my classroom in higher ed, I always think about the most distant students. So there's a lad in our class and he's in a wheelchair, and I know he went to a deaf school and I know his mum and he's a great kid, but I always think, how am I going to make sure he can participate in this? He's learning in this, rather than how am I going to get the middle group through so that my stats look good. So I definitely think there's a conversation to be had. And I agree with you, Emma, around like, the critique. So I'm angry at times because I was really let down And I suppose I feel kind of close to people who are still being let down in education. So it can be hard for me to be like impartial. In my own life, I'll just say this finally, you know, in 2003, I did an access program. And at that time, we had amazing policies that were joined up that allowed me to keep my social welfare, which wasn't great, but it was enough to get a grant that made me feel secure, to keep my housing support. And then there was community childcare because I was a lone parent. So there was all these things that actually met that bottom layer that made me secure enough to be able to move. And also I was getting free mental health support that had no waiting list. So I was in therapy that was free and local. So like when I was offered the opportunity to participate in education, then bottom areas of Maslow's hierarchy were actually taken care of by the state. Unfortunately, that's not where we're at right now. And so as educators, I think we do have to be aware that like Bloom's taxonomy is not the only thing we need to be worrying about. We need to know that kids are struggling.
They're very fancy diagrams and lovely buzzwords, but I think sometimes they get relegated to the shelf as an ornament and not a tool. Yeah. Declan, what do you think?
Yeah, like I suppose in relation to like what can you do in the classroom and stuff, like Katrina saying, thinking about that student, like, and I suppose this is maybe something that Emma experiences as well, like, you know, in the range of adult education, we're working in groups that are small, relatively small groups, you know, maybe 20 to 30 students or learners in a room. And like, you know, the principles of UDL and being, you know, flexible in your approach and assessment and really kind of, you know, learner centered and being able to kind of tap into, you know, a learner's interest and potential and what they can do and giving them some kind of choice, like that all has a huge impact on their ability to progress. And you can take into account what's going on outside of the four walls of the college or the education center, and, you know, work around, you know, that the student is turning up, is there, wants to learn. So how flexible can you be in that assessment? And, you know, but unfortunately that's not the case in a lot of, you know, courses and programs, and there's, you know, very rigid fundamentals around assessment and criteria that have to be followed and stuff. But I don't know, maybe ChatGPT will come and blow it all up, like, you know, and maybe it will really force us as educators to get away from a model that, you know, really, you know, and I'm talking about higher education here, where if you're reading loads of books and you're really well used to sitting down and reading and you're writing and you've had all that kind of, you know, education and networks thrown at you like that, and read language that works in an academic space, you'll do okay. But maybe ChatGPT will mean we have to kind of rethink that and start to get into kind of really alternative ways of assessment. And maybe things like relationship and, you know, lived experiences can start to play a factor in all of our, you know, courses and programs in education.
Guys, I'm just aware we're kind of drawing towards the end of our hour here. I'd like to just pick up on a couple of things there, though, just anecdotally. Again, Katrina, what you've kind of mentioned there earlier on, and again now, you know, we need our best teachers, our crack troops at the front lines where they can do the most good. I worked as a stage actor for a number of years. For example, obviously we're trying to communicate to a large group of people, so it's got a lot of very direct correlations in my mind. Anyway, you're trying to impart a story to a couple of thousand people. You always pitched it to the person at the back, because if the person at the back could hear you, obviously everybody else could. So that's where we aimed, to just simply project your voice and your body. You're communicating to them. In the classroom right now, and we'll have a staff meeting tomorrow, we'll often talk about, you know, differentiation in the classroom. How do we differentiate to our students there? Where do we place our resources? We brought in team teaching now to our school this year. It's fantastic, but I know we have to serve the top end students, and sometimes they are left adrift as well. But I mean, for me and for a lot of people, I really do feel that those that have the language and the experience, the wealth of coming from a place where education is valued, they're kind of gonna do well anyway. So that's yet another reason why it's the people that need the most help, if you want to call it at the bottom of the fringes, whichever way you want to orientate that. That's where our resources, I feel, individually and collectively need to go and catch those wider networks of people. The people inside by the fire with the language and the love at home, I don't mean to just cut them away altogether, but they're kind of going to do okay anyway. Yeah, I think maybe everybody would like to say something as we move towards kind of maybe closing up our conversation.
Yeah, just an awareness, like from my own perspective, is just an awareness around kind of cultural sensitivity and language barriers to, kids, young people's emotional well-being, like in groups, and it's just really extremely important, and kind of for an inclusive kind of classroom, kind of challenging and rewarding. It can be very challenging and rewarding, and because everyone really should have the opportunity to engage in learning.
Yeah, I might go, Katrina, and leave you with the last word. Like I think I'm going to steal something from Rose Ryan, who the head of Access in Maynooth, at a recent event around the UDL. She was just simply saying, like, support everyone when it comes to education. So it's really our job.
Just thanks for listening, and I know education is the key not only to employment, but it actually changes lives. Like, it's the only thing that made me feel like a valuable human being and made me realize that I wasn't to blame for my failings. And I think that gift should be given to everybody equally, and we should work hard. And just for people in a position of privilege like us, like, we need to be using that privilege in the right way. You're either helping or you're harming.
Yeah.
That's my view. And and doing nothing is harming.
That's right. Yeah.
And so, I think we can all do a lot. We are obviously in these conversations, but yeah, thank you so much for listening to us as well.
Oh, absolutely. I have to say that, thank you for everybody else. Thanks for asking me, because I would have always felt on the outside of things too, and I'm very chuffed to be, well, I'm delighted for myself that I'm involved in education. I went there myself, paid for it myself. I went through the long hours myself. I don't mind doing stuff for myself. That's how you get things done. But I was chuffed to be treated as an equal. And to be involved with you guys, and just to see maybe things are coming together and we can do so much. It certainly, I mean, I've got like goosebumps on my body right now, because it touches me deeply, and I'm excited rather than angry to be in company with so many people online that I can't see, but obviously are here, giving up their time because they care. They're in the field. So maybe this is a trough that we come and take a good, long, cool drink of water and go back out into the desert and show people the way back to the trough, if we can at all. We show by example, I think.
Kind of like the horse analogies. Kind of feeling good about them as well. Love it. I like that. Approach them with your eyes down. It's really nice. Yeah, love it.
Well, actually, so if I could just say on that, it took me an awful long time to realize that we're predators and horses are prey, and everything that comes after it, that you want to happen in that relationship with that horse, you've got to understand that you're prey. That they're prey and you're a predator. Nobody can help that. Well, they certainly can't help it, but I can. If I'm looking directly at you, it means I'm locked on you for attack. By simply downing my eyes, I am communicating. And to cross that analogy back over to the education system, I think sometimes that whether they mean to be or not, but the educated ones, they're a little bit like the predators in a way. they need to learn to down their eyes. We need to learn to down our eyes, open our hands, and show that we are not a threat, and that if I turn away from you, you might follow me. I don't need to drive you forward. I need to down my eyes and show you the way, and you'll follow. You know.
I love this. Okay, can we stop with the horse analogies now? Because anybody logs in at the end will think that they're on the wrong video.
Sure.
I will just add one thing though, the sugar cubes, we'll bring them because I like a bit of sweetness. So that might be the nice thing to bring.
Sure.
But thanks so much, Macdara. It was great that you facilitated us, and really enjoyed being on with everybody as well. It's been a great old chat.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks, Macdara. Thanks, all. Thanks for playing it. And Sinead.
Are we
and Brendan,
done?
I think so. Gurmila Magwev, and to everybody else there, good evening and good luck.
Thanks,
Okay.
guys.
So, hey.
See you later.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks, Katrina. Thanks a million.
Thanks,
Thanks, Emma.
That was brilliant.
Thanks, Macdara.
Yeah, I'm still here. I just turned off my
Sorry.
video.
Thank you.
I'm not sure what the wrap-up procedure here is, but I'm going to stay online. I'll stay here for a minute or two and see how we
Thanks a
go.
million, Sinead.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, Emma, that was
Thanks,
my
Emma.
voice.
It was fabulous.
It was fantastic. Some very great insights there.
And great conversation in the chat as well. There was a parallel discussion going on.
Yes, I'm hoping, Alfie, that we can get a copy of that chat.
I think there's a transcript, so it should be. I will also try to export it right now.
That would be fantastic. Thank you. There were some wonderful comments.
How time flies when there's so much to say and so much passion behind it. I mean, geez, that hour. It's like sometimes I used to think going into teaching when I started out first, like, oh my God, how am I gonna get through this 40 minutes? And nowadays it's like, fuck it, I really need more time, you know. I think this is a pure example of that. I mean, I really feel like that was only maybe the first 20 minutes. I hope everybody that was viewing here felt the same way.
I think so. I mean, I think definitely judging by the level of online chat, you opened up huge flow of conversation, which really was the intention of it, which is great. And I mean, I think it's an ongoing conversation as well. It's one that this is just one piece of, and it'll keep going in different directions, different approaches. So it was great. Kind of really did what we hoped with it in terms of kind of giving people that space to listen, talk, think, and continue the conversation.
Great.
Okay.
What happens next for for the project, Bernie and Sinead?
Bernie,
So you
I
want
got no
Sinead?
voice.
We've got it kind of, it's part of a bigger Erasmus project with other European partners. So we've kind of got similar conversations running in the other countries and the other contexts as
great,
well.
yeah.
And then at the same time, we're also doing kind of ongoing research, which is up on a kind of our website as well. But in terms of just trying to kind of build that community of practice among educators at both second level and further education level, build resources, create shared spaces, shared practices, be able to kind of have mobilities, you know, just building that kind of knowledge about what's going on in education. And I think really trying to do it in that inclusive way that really is trying to kind of capture that intersectionality that somebody mentioned in the chat, but also the complexity and the kind of deep structural nature of this. I mean, I think I was really struck by what was in the chat around kind of, you know, it's not just about the teachers. That's too simple a focus or answer. And they often can be the scapegoat, but that there's much deeper, broader structural issues, but equally education and the system is responsible for what its patch is and what it does. You know, so I think kind of, you know, that piece of it. So kind of keep working away on that with our partners as well. I think you know,
thanks, Bernie. Thanks, Sinead.
Thanks so much, Ellen.
Yeah, no, really appreciate everything.
No problem.
We'll
Thank you.
catch up
Bye.
with you again. Take care.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you so much, Macdara. That was amazing.
And again, Sinead in particular, because I made the connection with you originally way back. I feel almost a little bit like Katrina with her educator picking her up. I responded to a generic email. You saw something, put your hand out, and I was in a position to be able to extend my hand and take it. And I think I'm really, really happy that I made a connection with you and that it's leading to places that really excite me. I'm palpitating here. I'm so excited. So, and I'm emotional. I think I care about these things. I think all of the people here do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hang up before I start crying. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I really
Well,
do
just so you
appreciate
know-
it, Macdara. It's one of those
just-
great connections that I think we've made, and we'll keep it going.
Yeah,
Good.
just so you know, Macdara, just to acknowledge Bernie. Bernie was the same for me.
Okay.
So we're in a space where it's continuously, the hand is always reaching out to like-minded people.
Well, my hand on the other side of it is out as well. I know. Yeah. Okay.